Good evening and welcome to the Ombudsman program. My name is Diane Welborn. I'm the Ombudsman and I'm going to be your host for this evening's program. Tonight we have a very interesting topic. We are going to be talking about the Source Water Protection Program and some proposed revisions to that program. And to help explain the program and the revisions proposed, I have with me two guests this evening. First, I'd like to introduce Ms. Tammi Clements, who is the Director of the City of Dayton Water Department. And we also have with us this evening City Manager Tim Riordan. Thank you both for coming this evening. I appreciate it so much.
Good to be here.
Thank you for having
Great.
us.
Before we dive in to talk about the program and the revisions, I'd like to offer you a chance. You said you had some remarks that you would like to present to the viewers.
Well, I would, and thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Sure.
I guess I'd characterize it, I'm mad.
Oh.
And I'm mad because people have been characterizing what we're doing as weakening our source water protection, our well field system. And it's just not the case. Anybody that thinks that we would be so stupid as to imperil our water system is just absolutely missing the boat. And it just frustrates me that with a number of people, we just can't get this across. And let me just explain a couple of things, and we'll talk about it in more detail as we go on. The kinds of things we're doing to strengthen it. We're banning 18 types of businesses from even coming into the area. You know, you don't want to control the area. You don't want people bringing in problems at all. And so we're increasing that from 8 to 26. We're increasing the fines if somebody violates it from $500 to a maximum of $50,000. We're going to increase the number of monitoring wells by 50%. So if there is any issue, we find it earlier and can take corrective action. We're going to try to prohibit any underground piping. There actually is underground pipelines in the area, and those are really one of the big risks because you can't see them. That's regulated by the federal government. There's nothing we can do particularly about that. We're using in the existing ordinance where we have a variance process, and this has been, somewhat controversial. People saying, oh, businesses can expand. Well, the existing ordinance has a variance. The difference is our variance has all kinds of requirements that businesses have to meet before a variance to add some pounds, chemicals, to the area. And so we think we've strengthened that particular factor significantly. We're going to have more frequent inspections in the area. We're going to increase the amount of money and change some of the ways so we can buy pounds from people. And that really takes pounds away from that could potentially pollute. You know, in the last 20 years or so, we've taken 28 million pounds out of the system. 28 million pounds. So when people talk about some businesses adding a few pounds, I just don't think the kinds of pounds we're talking about are in the hundredths of the percents of the total pounds that are there. What else did I want to cover? Oh, we identified more chemicals that are problems so we can eliminate those chemicals and businesses that deal with them. We've added, in addition to our typical 1-year time zone that we have that we regulate, we're putting a 5-year time zone, which we're not regulating, but which we're going to now do some more preventive actions there so we can take preventive action earlier. And then lastly is just training to the businesses and their staff in terms of what to do. So I just want to, the people that think we're doing something crazy, it just frustrates me that we can't get that across. So I look forward, I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to make some of these points.
Well, thank you very much, Tim, for bringing all of that right to the beginning of the program, because our purpose is to educate the public and to let them have an opportunity to call in on this show or to formulate their questions and put them to you all in future public hearings that I know we're going to talk about as we go along with the program. But thank you for getting all of that out. Why don't we step back a little bit and talk about the reason for the proposed changes? Why now? Why at this time?
Sure, that's a very good question. The EPA actually published a revised set of guidance that relates to the boundary, what Tim just mentioned, the 1 year, the regulated area. And in that guidance, they want you to take a look at the uses that are, or the current operations that are going on, and they want you to model that scientifically. And they want you to set up a protection area where you're drawing the groundwater from. So that guidance came out. The city, and they actually recommend that you take a look at your boundary once every 5 years in this guidance. Dayton last looked at its protection area in 1993, so we were well beyond the time frame for us to really take a good look at how we were operating in 1993 versus how we're operating today. As a part of our looking at the actual boundary, we also took this opportunity to look at the very programs that help to support the protective aspect of the program. We saw this as an opportunity to incorporate what we've learned over the last 26 years and to strengthen the program, as Tim had referred to. So we've learned a lot of lessons over the years. There's a lot of best management practices that we have also learned. And so this was an opportunity for us to incorporate that while we also took a look at the area being protected. So we didn't just step out and say, hey, this is just sounds like a fun thing to do. It isn't. It was really, being requested by the EPA, and it was the right time to look at it because we are operating a lot differently than we have in the last couple of decades.
Right.
And once we started doing this with the EPA, I mean, in my mind, there were two goals we wanted to do. Number one, how could we strengthen the program and do a good job on that because we've learned things over the years. And the second thing is, could we give some controlled flexibility for some of the businesses in the area?
Okay.
Sure.
And with the EPA requests, were there specific directions that they provided for what to change? I mean,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, their
and what
guidance.
are some of those things?
So
that-
the guidance actually looks at your water quality goals, your emergency preparedness goals, the area that you're specifically going to protect. How do you respond to that? Those are a couple of the key areas. As far as setting up the boundary, they're very specific about the types of assumptions that you use in the modeling process as well. They really want you to look at not just that area, but what are the most sensitive areas that you may have in a particular area. Look at your high-risk land use activities that also exist in the area. Contamination that you may be managing to make sure that that doesn't enter into your water system. So those are just a few factors that they do want you to look at. It really results in a very comprehensive plan that will then go forward to the EPA, and we've submitted that in the past, and this will be updating that, as I just mentioned.
Does the EPA requirements, do they offer any assistance in this balance between protection and use? Does the EPA speak on those issues?
Well, they encourage you as individual communities to really look at the guidance that you have, also to confer with the various stakeholder groups that you may have to make sure that you are striking the proper balance. They are specifically interested in the area to be protected. As far as the programmatic aspects of it, as to how do we go about making sure that there aren't high risk there, they leave that to each community because every community is different.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier that there are pipes that are in this area that are beyond the scope of the city, that are regulated by federal. Does the EPA then deal with anything with respect to those types of pipes?
I just point out, we're actually trying to control as much as we can them. We're really,
Yes.
it's federal and state that are going to regulate them,
Yes.
but we've put in some new features to say, so that we can weasel our way at the table if anybody tries to do anything and get in on doing that. Tammi can tell you more of the
Okay.
details.
Our goal is to really form and establish a relationship with the folks that have preemptive authority, so that at the time that a proposal does come in and someone wants to put in a new pipeline, we want to be able to educate about the sensitive nature of this particular area. so that if they understand the risks that are there, that perhaps we can agree that this is not the best place for that pipeline to go.
We flat out do not want a pipeline there,
Okay.
period.
All right.
No.
We'll end anything starting in that regard right
Yes.
now. No
Yeah.
pipeline.
And we do keep our eyes open for proposals for new pipelines coming through, and we look at where they are. We do comments, and whenever there's public, input possible, we give that input. But we want to forge maybe even a closer relationship for the folks within this area to educate them as to the sensitive areas around this sole source aquifer. There's only one system here. It's not like we get to get this wrong.
Right, exactly. All right, let's go back and talk a little bit about your overarching goals for the revision.
Sure. The overarching goals were just what Tim mentioned.
Okay.
It is for us to be able to continue the level of protection and even increase that, and to continue the mitigation of risk within the areas that are delineated. Tim doesn't like the word delineated, the area that we regulate.
All right.
And then the second goal is to allow for some specific limited growth for businesses that have a need to be able to grow, especially in the areas of chemical inventory. They have existing sites that are there. They have a specific reason why they may need additional chemicals. It will be tied to a specific use. But those are the two overarching goals: to continue the level of protection and to increase where we can, and to allow for some limited growth within the area as well.
Let's. I'd like to ask the crew at DATV if they could put up on these on the viewer for the viewers, for the public to see the revisions and the boundaries, so that we can talk a little bit about that. You all aren't, you know the map we're looking
Sure.
at, so it's not in front of you. I apologize, but why don't you talk a little bit about what the yellow and the purple and the red are? Here we go. You can
Sure.
see it now.
So what you actually have here probably needs to turn a little bit, but up to the north is our two well fields. We have a Riprap Road well field, which is to the far east, and we have a Miami well field, which is kind of in the middle, center ground. Down to the southwest is our Mad River well field. And so the gold lines, let me back that up a little bit. The green line that you see is the existing regulated area. And formerly, most folks would know that as the 1 year time of travel. That is what we regulate. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was, yeah.
That's much better.
That's
So
much
for the
better.
viewers, you can see 75 running down the side there. Right. Thank you, with the interstate symbols. Go
And
ahead.
so let me kind of describe the three lines that you would see here. The red line, I like to refer to that as ground zero. That is our active well field areas. That's where we pump water into production. And we also have our water treatment plants in those areas. So the well fields actually pump to the actual plants to produce our drinking water. The heavy gold line that you see in the three that I just referred to, that is our new it was our first proposed regulated area. The green line, as I just mentioned, is the existing line, and the area that has it's dotted along with the deeper gold line is the newly proposed line moving forward. Outside of that, you kind of see a lavender kind of purple area. That is that 5-year area that Tim mentioned that we are broadening our focus in how to protect. So the geographical area that we're going to be doing strategies, risk reduction strategies in, is actually going to grow beyond the green line that we currently regulate out into this larger line. So there's a regulated area, that's the gold area, and the purple area is where we will do some very targeted strategies to reduce risk out in the broader areas.
Okay. I know this may be a little basic for us, but can you please explain the 5 years out and what you mean by the 5 years plan? You mean 5 years from now where the city will be? Or
No,
let's
no.
let our viewers know real clearly
That's a
what
very
does
good
that
question.
mean? Yeah.
When I talked a little bit earlier about the modeling process. And so what the modeling does is has a group of assumptions that are put into a computerized model. It's a simulator. And the assumptions you put in is how hard you're pumping, where you're pumping water into production, and it creates these particle lines that go out a year because that's what you've programmed it to do. And the far reach of the year creates that boundary that we're talking about. And when we say a 1 year, we're saying it's the time that it takes contamination, if it hits that boundary, to actually reach the actual wells where we're pumping. And when you look at the 5-year boundary, we're saying from the outermost boundary level, it takes 5 years from that boundary to reach that ground zero where the wells are located.
Okay,
so
thank
that's
you.
what that means.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate that. Is there anything else you'd like to add about those proposed revisions at this time?
The proposed revisions as it relates to the area
yes,
being
yes,
protected. Based on everything that we have modeled at this point and the feedback, we know that the areas that we show as the 1 year regulated area and the 5-year unregulated area is the most protective zone, geographical area that we can put forth at this time. So we are going to remain just as protective today as we always have with both the 1 and the 5-year.
I'd like to mention one other thing. We originally put a proposal out there in May, and then we had hearings, and we learned things from those hearings. And so we actually made a change in the geographic area. Some of the local geologists brought up some points to us that caused us to rethink and put some area back in that we had thought we could take out and realized, no, we needed to make that change back. So that process of running it to the community, we learned a lot in that process. We didn't think we had the perfect solution and really wanted to listen. We made a number of changes as a result of that. And this was one of them. We feel really very much more comfortable about that area right now.
Yeah, well, that's the value of getting all the input there. Exactly. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit then about the revision of the pounds.
Okay.
And let's first define, I mean, we know what a pound is, but we're speaking about pounds of harmful chemicals when you talk about reduction of pounds, and when you spoke earlier about removal of the large amounts of pounds. So let's talk a little bit about those proposed changes.
Sure. With the geographical area actually being reduced, the businesses that operate within that reduced area that actually has chemical inventory likewise would reduce, because some of the businesses are actually outside of the regulated area. So we started out with about 129 million pounds in the entire area, and it will be reduced to about 120 million pounds of chemicals. But one important factor that we want to make sure that folks understand is, even though there are some businesses that will now move outside of the regulated area, for emergency preparedness sake, we will still know what chemicals are at the particular sites within the 5-year area, so that we're able to respond if there is a catastrophic event. So they're not gone and forgotten. We still know how to respond should something occur. That information is still available to us. So the reduction in pounds actually comes because some businesses with that line coming in are now outside of that area.
Okay.
But we still will be able to respond and work with those businesses.
And how frequently are the reports of the pounds required? How frequently is that?
Sure. The businesses that currently operate report every other year, and it's called a Regulated Substance Activity Inventory Report. That's every other year, and then we do site inspections about every other year. And one of the proposals that we have put in place too is to do more frequent inspections, especially of the businesses that have the higher risk land uses that are going on. So that kind of helps us to keep our finger on the pulse of what's really going on there. And for some of the businesses that are conforming uses and they don't really have chemicals, we can put our resources to the higher risk activities.
Okay. In the initial plan, there was a point to, there was a risk point buy-down process that I believe has now been removed from the current proposal. Is that correct?
There was an exchange.
Exchange,
We were going to have people buy and sell, like create a market. Somebody could buy and sell these pounds and do that. When this is an area where we listen to the business side of things. The business side of things said, we don't think it'll work for the following reasons. They gave us a bunch of reasons, and we think they were right. Now, I really like that exchange method because I like the market working and solving this problem. And the businesses came back and said, no, we would really like the city to have a regulatory process in terms of that. And so that's when we came back and said, okay, let's refine this variance process, which is in the current ordinance, and let's make it a little more controlled, make anybody that wants a variance have to give much more precise information that relates to what are they going to do if they ask for more pound, to be able to use more pounds, because machines, for instance, will have certain chemicals that they use. So if they want to do that, we now have a list of items that they're going to have to answer before we would recommend to the Board of Zoning Appeals that they actually do give them this variance from the normal zoning.
Okay. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more on that, since we've introduced that topic about the specificity needed for requesting a variance?
Sure.
Because I think maybe you have a little bit more to add on that topic.
Sure. As Tim mentioned earlier, there is an existing ordinance variance process as a part of the zoning code with the program that we monitor today. This new proposal moving forward added a minor variance to the process, which would allow businesses to be able to add about 10,000 or less through the zoning administrator. But we put in place for whether they're getting a minor variance or something over 10,000 pounds, there's a set of criteria that we've now outlined, and it has some objective criteria that we're asking businesses to really look at. We want to know what is your reason for adding the chemicals. It has to be tied to your actual use. You have an operation that is going on. You might want to add another machine, and that machine might have a reservoir, and that would equate to a certain amount of chemicals. So you're going to come forward and you're going to say, I need to expand, I'm adding a machine, here's the reason why.
Very precise.
Very precise, very specific need.
Okay.
And it could be numerous reasons why someone would want to do that. So they come forward and they demonstrate that to us. They talk to us about what type of engineering controls and what other strategies are they going to put in place that is going to make sure that we ensure no higher risk is being brought to this area as a result of their increasing their chemicals.
Okay. I'd like you to hold that thought, and we're going to come back to the variance, but we have a caller that we want to let come in on the conversation. Thank you, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, I just want to thank you, to thank the Ombudsman for doing this program. It's so important, and I want to thank your guests who are so well informed. Our water is just such a precious resource because of the size and the age of the aquifer, and so I'm so glad that attention is being carefully paid to this. My call and my concern has to do with the level of awareness of the different kinds of chemical pollutants that may be already there in the ground that may have accumulated in the past and that may have to be dealt with before factories are reopened or variances are granted to expand. What has alerted me to this is a recent news story about North Carolina where terrible toxins were found to be leaching into the water supply, even arsenic. So I'd just like to be reassured that we are aware of the level of chemicals and potential toxins that are out there. Thank you.
And thank you for your call. We'll ask that that issue be addressed. Thank you very much. I think you and the viewers could probably hear the question pretty clearly, that he was loud enough.
Sure.
Okay, I won't repeat it then. Yes.
Sure. You know, in addition to our knowing what chemicals are housed in the uses that are within this regulated area, we also have what is called an early warning network. We have monitoring wells that are placed strategically throughout the 1-year area. And the purpose of that network is, and we sample that on a regular basis for a list of chemical contaminants. What we do is we do that so that we understand if there are any chemicals that are moving towards the well fields. We also do hundreds of tests every single day, from the early warning network through all the way through our distribution system, so that we make sure that the water that is used that comes from underground that's going into production, we ensure that there are no contaminants in it before it actually reaches the production, our treatment process. If we find water that perhaps does have chemicals in it, we have things such as air strippers and remediation units that will take that water out of production. We clean that water and return it to the ground. We only pump from the production wells that we know have high quality groundwater. So there are safeguards. We are constantly testing to make sure where we're drawing the water from, we know exactly that it meets the Safe Drinking Water Act standards and that it is it's more than acceptable. We exceed the limits for consumption of our drinking water.
And part of the proposal is it will add additional chemicals to the list that we say these also could affect the quality of the drinking water, things that hadn't been added to there before.
And this is the additional 29 or
26.
26, sorry. The additional 26.
Categories.
No, this is
Land use.
the extra.
Monitoring wells?
No, the chemicals on the federal lists of what is troubled chemicals or contaminants.
Oh, gotcha. So we're adding the CCL and the UCLs, about
Yeah.
116.
Yeah.
About
The-
116, because of course we are inventing chemicals all the time.
Every day.
So
Right,
yes,
right.
we have to keep up with that.
The,
So-
the other thing because of that, and that's where you ask about the 26 and the 8, is different kinds of businesses that we say shouldn't be there. And the reason they shouldn't be there is because they tend to use the kind of chemicals that if anything did happen, could affect the groundwater. So we don't want those businesses to come in. So we're drawing a line and saying, no, they can't come in. The businesses that have those can't expand. So what we're trying to do is increase that so that before there's a problem, you just don't let the problem even come in. And that's another one of the things that we're doing to say, let's just not let that kind of business in there. For instance, dry cleaning is one of the businesses that creates a chemical that is very bad for the drinking water. They aren't going to be there.
Okay, no dry cleaning. All right,
Yeah.
Sure.
certainly. All right, I probably want to come back to that topic a little bit too, but I want to go back to where we were on the variances
Sure.
before our caller. And you were describing the specificity that was required when a variance is going to be requested.
Sure.
Then what is the process by which that is then reviewed? The project comes in and it's very specific. Who looks at it and who does what with it?
The application would actually be made through the zoning administrator. That request does come forward. And then there's a routing list of folks that would come together to review that. The zoning administrator does not have the disciplinary expertise to review that on his own. So he necessarily relies on the expertise that you would have in the water department and in the fire department to look at the types of chemicals that are being requested, how they'll be used, and look at storage and handling and how it would react. So we work together to review those specific criteria to make sure that what they're asking to do will not, like I say, increase the risk.
Okay. Is there a plan at this time to have public input in any of this process, in
Sure.
this variance process?
Sure. If the application does go before the BZA, there is public
Board of Zoning
comment.
Appeals,
Yes,
yes,
the
yeah.
Board of Zoning Appeals. There's a public process there. Now, as we did one of the town hall meetings, we did have someone bring up the question about the public input in the minor variance process. So that is something that we've taken back and we are looking at to make sure that there is an opportunity for folks to be, number one, aware that a request has come forward so that there is that opportunity to comment as well.
Okay.
But even, I want to point out, if the 10,000 pounds, and you can't do like 9,900 and then do another 9,900 and another, once you hit 10,000, it has to go to the BZA, to the Board of Zoning Appeals. But that 10,000 pounds makes up approximately 1/100% of what's currently, there in the well field. So that is not a significant amount of an increase.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that point. That's great. Okay, the fines, the revisions. You touched on the fines at the beginning when you were making your opening remarks. Why don't you talk a little bit about the fines as they're now proposed?
Sure. Currently, we have $50 a day as a fine, up to a maximum of I think it's $500, which is pretty skimpy. But in just about every stakeholder group that we went to, folks were really concerned that they were not high enough. Where we've ended is $1,000 per day, up to a maximum of $50,000 for fines. But
we wanted to be able to get somebody's attention, and we think this gets their attention a lot more than $500 and $50 a day did.
Certainly.
But in addition to the fine, we have other ways to, if there's a problem, it's not just the fine that is going to make somebody correct. Why don't you tell them what?
Sure. So we have other tools that are available. First of all,
Before it gets to the point
before
of
it
a
gets
fine.
there, and we normally step through several stages before we get to the punitive stage of a penalty. You can start out with, we would issue a notice of violation if someone is not in compliance, and give them a time frame to be able to correct it. The director has the ability to issue a cease and desist order as well if we really feel that a threat does exist. We can also get help from the fire department and the police department if it comes to that, to be able to help us to enforce that violation.
So we have the muscle on our side to enforce this.
We actually have all of those things in place. Even more so than that, and what our citizens should really recognize is we keep in place an emergency contract as well through the fund itself. So that if
And by the fund, you mean the
wellfield
protection fund.
and
Okay.
everyone pays into that. So if there is an accidental release or a spill, we're going to respond to it immediately. And then we're going to try to work with that responsible party to then take the lead. If they are slow to take the lead or refuse to take the lead, that's where that penalty comes in. That's how we get their attention.
Okay.
So.
And we can just go in and do it ourselves and charge them back. So it's not if you have a recalcitrant owner, it's just we go in, we take the corrective action, we bill them.
All right.
Sure.
Have we had to issue a cease and desist order before?
No, we have not.
Okay.
Now, we've gotten up to the violation, we've brought in the fire department, we've gone up the rung of abilities that we have and tools that we have, but we've not had to fine, not for source water protection, we've not done the fines yet.
Okay. Because as a part of the variance process, I read in some of the literature that that whether or not the person, the entity asking for the variance was a good steward, whether their history of usage would be taken into account in reviewing these types of things.
Yes, we want to understand from the businesses, they may have other people that they also report to outside of the source water protection area. We want to know their compliance history, because typically if you're not a good actor with the other regulators that you have to report to, it's not very good that you're going to be compliant if we allow you to bring in additional chemicals. So that is an area that we really want to look at. But then there's another area that we're going to be looking at, and it's a risk management plan. And there's various factors in a risk management plan. You talk about your spill prevention and control. What are the procedures that you have in place that if a spill occurs, that your employees and you actively know what to do to reverse that so that you do not increase that risk to the groundwater? We want to know what risk management plan that you overall that you have. What's your preventative maintenance like? How do you take care of your equipment? Do you have the proper controls, fire suppression, containment for your machines? We want to understand all of these uses within your facility, and not that it's just sitting on a shelf. We want to understand, do you train your employees and do you audit yourself? So as a part of this application process, we want you to give us all of these plans that you have in place, and if you don't have the plans, we want you to develop them and then to actually do annual training on those with your employees. That way we know that if you get this additional chemicals and you increase that inventory, your staff knows what to do in case of an accident.
Okay.
And in the current ordinance, there's none of this. You know, and that's there. People come in and ask for a variance for whatever. This is what we want to put in so that there can be flexibility, but it's going to be controlled flexibility with the businesses.
Right, and with increasing accountability. We will
Yes.
come back to that. I'm being told we have another caller, so I'd like to welcome the caller. We'd like to hear your question. You're on the air.
Great, thank you. Before I say my question, I just had a comment about the way it's been portrayed. People who have questions and concerns about this proposal are being portrayed, and that we are somehow crazy for thinking that this is going to harm our drinking water. And I think if you were at the town hall and you saw the number of city neighborhood leaders who came out and expressed concern, that there really is some valid concern about the proposal. And I'd like to talk about the variance, and I appreciate the examples that are being given about how this minor variance or a regular variance would be granted. But I think when you look at the proposal, you're really seeing no criteria in the proposal that'll be part of the actual ordinance for the zoning administrator or the BZA to look at. And I think that's really problematic. And it's going to, make it very difficult for citizens to get behind any proposed change to this source water protection program.
I think that's.
Thank you for your comment and your question. We will get this discussed. Thank you again.
I think
Please.
the simple answer is it will be in the ordinance.
Yes.
Okay, so more language is forthcoming
yeah.
with this.
Yeah.
Okay, with what you have described. So
Yes.
that is your plan. Okay, good.
Yes,
Well,
as part of
I'm sure the caller would be happy with that.
Oh,
with
yeah.
that to see what's written. Yes. Okay.
yes, so it is there specifically called out, and the examples that we're giving is actually a part of the application process. And so when the businesses answer these questions and give us that information will be evaluated based on the criteria that is outlined within the zoning code. They're giving us the information so that we can make a decision based upon the 8 categories that they have to be able to prove.
The categories
Yes.
in the code. Okay.
The categories in the code itself.
Let's talk a little bit. You've mentioned with the variance process and the specificity of the change, and you've talked about the risk management a little bit. But let's talk about the case scenario where there is a leakage or a spill. Are you able to look at the entity's insurance, the entity's ability to pay for cleanup, even though the city would come in and would do it because of the importance and how it needs to be done? Is ability to repay a part of any of this process?
As it stands currently, we will bill back the responsible party, even if we have to take them to court to do the recovery. We take whatever means is available to us to do that recovery. It's up to the business, how do they make good on the total amount of that cleanup. Now, will there be instances that a spill could occur at a business that really can't afford to do it? That's going to exist. It's always going to exist. But for the most part, we do not just allow a business that has created a problem just to walk away from that problem. We try to recover the full amount or the fullest amount possible through every means and court if necessary.
Okay. Certainly, and I guess part of my question was coming from the fact that one thinks of these types of cleanups as being extremely expensive. So how large is our Wellfield Protection Fund? Do we feel that's large enough?
Sure. As we have managed the existing program, we have the ability to go up to $1 surcharge per 1,000 cubic feet. We're currently doing about 60 cents per 1,000. As we are putting forward this expansion to the program, we do have a little growth ability within that surcharge to grow the fund a little bit more to be able to cover what we need. There's $5 million that's always set in reserve for a catastrophic event as well.
All right. And according to those that look at best practices, that's good? That's where we should be?
We think we're pretty good.
That's where we should be. Okay. Why don't we talk a little bit about the stakeholders that you all have talked to? You've been having lots of conversations about this in addition to public hearings, lots of additional meetings, including, please, our partners, because the map that we showed takes us over into some other jurisdictions that are in this with us, so to speak. So why don't you start with them and then other stakeholders that you've talked to?
We've talked with a variety of stakeholder groups within the city and Montgomery County altogether. We've talked to our multi-jurisdictional partners because the proposals that we have out right now apply to the city of Dayton. So we do really want to make that clear. We want our jurisdictions to also follow suit after we get through this process. We've talked with environmental groups, academia, the consultant world when we're looking at our science. We've talked with the business community, our government partners in public health, Dayton and Montgomery County. We've talked with Montgomery County Water Environmental Services as well. We have spoken with just private citizens as well. If they can't make meetings, we've made ourselves available to speak with those. I think to date we've probably done some 60 meetings over this period of time, and several town hall meetings where we've gotten very valuable feedback from the folks that were in attendance there as well.
What has been the role of Dayton's Environmental Advisory Board in this process?
We've met with the Environmental Advisory Board. They have really looked at the science along with about the other 9 to 10 policy issues that we were looking at. They've given us continuous feedback on what we have put forward to date. And as the caller had stated, not all of it is in agreement. They've given us some food for thought. We have given considerable consideration to everything that has been shared with us. And some of the changes that you actually see here today was a result of some of the feedback that we did receive from the EAB as well as our citizens groups.
I've heard you comment several times in this quick program about how, where you have taken good advice when it's come forward with there. What can you speak to? What the notion that perhaps removing businesses from an area is a possible way to go. Can you address that for those who might say, help a business move if they need so many chemicals?
Well, yes, that has come forward as a recommendation. We're looking at where can we get the largest return for the investment that we are making. It's not practical for every business, and quite frankly, for quite a few of the businesses, such as your manufacturers or industrial uses. You're not going to relocate them. And we really believe that looking at some of the other targeted strategies, we have that limited pot. It's not unlimited, so we are working within a finite amount of money. We want to really to push forward the strategies that we believe are going to go the furthest to reducing the risk. And so the more businesses that we can help to put in engineering controls, that we can help them do secondary containment or other types of strategies, including purchasing the chemicals that they may have there, I think those dollars are better spent than if we spend multi-millions of dollars to remove just one use. We want to be able to address as many uses as we can, and not just in that 1 year area. We want to be able to expand that. We believe education and awareness will go a long way, because if businesses understand the sensitive nature of where they're located and how they can help us to protect it, we believe that those risks will be reduced in that way, because they'll understand the importance of that water, and they'll join us in that. We have that today.
Okay. And you had mentioned earlier about the reduction of pounds and the buyback. Is that proposed to continue at its same rate, at an increased rate? What would be your comment on that?
Sure. We are looking at increasing the rate that we do pay. We're saying up to about $4 a pound. We currently do a little less than $2. We don't know where we'll end up. We've actually had some pretty good suggestions on reverse auction process, some really innovative ideas that they could be other tools that we could put in the toolbox to come up with other means of reducing risk. So yes, we want to continue to reduce the amount of chemicals that are there, but we're open to other ideas to reduce risk as well, because it's going to be those multiple tools that keep us effective in our protection strategies.
Are there other areas of the country struggling with their protecting their water resources that in particular that we have turned to look at or talk to or take ideas from?
I would like to say that we have it all together here, and Dayton is really a model program nationally and internationally, but we do look at what is occurring in other jurisdictions, to be honest with you. You want to know what other people have learned within their communities as well, to see if it's something that our community could benefit from. So we watch the Virginias, and we watch Camden and salt piles and people who have lost well fields, and why did they lose well fields. So we want to know the best practices, and we also want to know what isn't so smart to do. Right? And so we continue to learn and talk with our partners just across the country to learn. It is an evolving process. We don't have the corner on the market. We'd like to pat ourselves on the back. We've done a great job, but we know we have to stay diligent if we're going to get better as we move forward as well.
Okay. All right. Very good. Then I also wanted to ask, what will be our next steps in this process?
We will continue meeting with our stakeholder groups, through the end of this month. After that, we will be forwarding the proposal, our proposal, to the plan board, and the plan board will review what we have, and then it would then move on to commission for review and action. We will be, as a part of our stakeholder groups, be also meeting with the plan board and the Board of Zoning Appeals, just to kind of talk about, refresh people's memories as to what the program is and what it has done, so that they have perspective, like we're trying to do with the rest of the stakeholder groups.
Okay.
The Plan Board is the agency that recommends changes in the zoning laws to the City Commission. So that's why it goes to the Planning Board first, and they have hearings, and then they make recommendations to the Commission for approval or disapproval.
Okay. Any target date for the Plan Board at this point, or you're still working on it?
We think it'll go to the Plan Board in January. We also wanted to have a hearing with the Plan Board, or an informal work session with them, so some of these technical things, they get a little understanding before it gets comes forward to them. And then it takes about 120 days or 4 months from the time it goes to the plan board to when it comes to the city commission for final decision.
Okay.
So it's probably more like late April, early May. If they end up having more hearings than normal, it could get into June.
Okay.
Somewhere in the later first half of the year.
Okay, and the public who wants to follow any of this can be on the website and see the announcements, right?
Yes, they can still
of
do
course.
that, and they'd be able to come to the plan board meetings as well.
Right. And also for the public that wants to read more about this, would you direct them to any particular, would the City of Dayton Water website? You're posting everything there?
we
Where
actually
can they
have-
get more resources?
We actually have a link out on the City of Dayton's main page, and from there they'll be directed to a site that has all of the information over the last 8 months or so.
Right. The website
Available.
is simple. It's DaytonOhio.gov.
That's very good. So anybody who's looking at this, who may be hearing it and living in another jurisdiction and maybe hasn't been watching it that closely yet, can go and take a look
Yes.
at all of this. That's wonderful. Our time is getting pretty short here now, and so I promised each of you that I would give you a minute for wrap-up remarks. So please, Tammi, go ahead.
I'd just like to say to all of our stakeholder groups that we have met with that we appreciate the diligence in which people have come out to give us comments and feedback on the proposal that we've had out there. We think because of this engagement that we've done, we really have a very strong program that we will be moving forward to the plan board. As Tim said at the beginning, I let him have he's mad, and I'll say that I'm happy with where we've ended as a part of this process. Dayton can really feel very confident that the program that we're moving forward is going to enhance the protective strategies that we currently have, and we're growing that into a stronger program.
All right. Thank you very much, Tim.
And I would just say it's simple. We had 2 goals. One is to strengthen our protection program, and I think we've talked about that and can do it. The second thing is to have controlled flexibility that would allow some flexibility for business, a small number of businesses to grow, and I think we've achieved that.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. We appreciate your coming on the program tonight. Very interesting topic. I wish you good luck in going through the rest of the process. Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
thank you to the viewers. We appreciate your watching the program this evening. Good night.